Greetings, everyone. My name's David Finnegan-Hosey. I'm the minister at Bon Air Christian Church. Thanks for taking some time to consider this mental wellness moment. It's part of our church's focus on wholeness ministry. And today I wanted to talk about grief and hope. And I'm doing that with two different things on my mind at the same time. The first is our recent beautiful Easter celebrations with all of the alleluias and the lilies, our proclamation of Jesus risen from the dead to bring us life and hope. But the second thing that is on my mind is a sad thing. It's a tragedy that's happened in our community recently. The death of two James River High School students in a car accident this week. These are students who were known and loved by members of our church and community. There are people in our community right now who are feeling shocked, who are grieving, who are feeling confused and lost. So we're keeping the family and the friends of these two young men in our prayers right now. As the Apostle Paul instructed the church to do, we grieve with those who are grieving, even as we rejoice with those who are rejoicing. And so as a community of faith, as is often the case, we're holding two realities together at one and the same time right now. The reality of hope and the reality of grief, the good news of the resurrection juxtaposed with tragic news. And in a sense, that's always true. We're always proclaiming good news, and at the same time, we're always holding space for grief and the tragedy that we know is there. It's there in the church. It's there in our neighborhoods, it's there in our nation, it's there in our world. There's a story that I've been thinking about. It's in the 11th chapter of John's Gospel, and it's a story about some friends of Jesus, their siblings, Mary and Martha and Lazarus. And if you were just to summarize this story really briefly, it would be a good news story. Without looking at too many of the details, it just goes like this. Lazarus dies, but then he's raised back to life by Jesus. And we see Mary and Martha and many around them proclaiming their faith in Jesus. It's a good news story. But if we look closer, we also see that it's a story that's really about grief. In fact, it's a story about how grief and faith aren't opposites, but that they share a home with each other. They live together. We see, for example, how Mary and Martha both express their grief in the form of anger. They get angry at Jesus when Jesus shows up on the scene. They both respond to him, their friend, by saying, "Look, Jesus, if you had been here, our brother would not have died." They confront Jesus with the reality of their pain. And we see in the story how that expression of anger and lament is a faithful act. Jesus doesn't contradict them, doesn't shut them down. In fact, it's this lament that leads into Martha's declaration of her faith in Jesus as the Messiah, the Christ. Grief and faith share a home. And when Jesus hears the same lament from Mary and sees her and those around her weeping, what does he do? He weeps as well. In John 11, verse 35, Jesus begins to cry. He begins to cry even though he knows that resurrection is on the horizon. Even though in just a few moments in the story, he's going to pray to God to raise Lazarus, saying, "Father, I thank you for already having heard me." I don't, and we don't, always have answers in the face of tragedy. What our faith gives us instead is an assurance of God's presence in the midst of pain, and the knowledge that grief and faith are not opposites. Jesus weeps. Certainly followers of Jesus weep too. Because grief is not a lack of faith. Faith is the thing we hold on to, and sometimes the things we have to hold on to for someone else when the currents of grief feel so strong that we worry we might drown in them. So in this Easter season, we proclaim the victory of life over death, and we do so knowing that we are holding open the space for those for whom that victory seems so distant right now. Our faith, with Martha's, is that Jesus is the Christ, the resurrection and the life, the one coming into the world, the same Jesus who weeps for his friend, because grief too is a sacred and a holy thing. So to you today, whether it's one of joy or one of mourning, or perhaps all of this and more mixed together, May you know the presence of Christ, who is with us and in whom nothing, not even death, can separate us from God's love. Amen.